The unified field is at the basis of experiential reality. There's a state of potentiality from which particles emerge and become ultimately what we experience as physical reality. Our true self is infinite and unbounded and eternal. That's the nature of our actual self. I had an experience once. I was experiencing myself as one with the infinite divine, pure, transcendent, but with a seed of individuality. So there was a sense of individuality, but completely merged with the divine. And at a certain point, I had the desire to experience the world of limitation. And my experience was, when I did that, is my soul shattered into millions and millions and millions of little shards. And each of those shards was a life. The more one is attuned with and in sync with the unified field, the more one is spontaneously in accord with the laws of nature, because the unified field is the laws of nature.
Well, that kind of explains a question I had, which was how and why things even come out of the unified field. And it seems to me that there's almost when things become to a point of intense friction, when the energy becomes hot enough, it needs to release. And is that kind of what you would?
I think it's even more fundamental than that. When I related this experience I had about my soul shattering into all those little pieces, the whole experience was that this is the divine leaping into the world of limitation with the intention of reunifying with the divine, but with this added experience of limitation, this wisdom of limitation that enriches the divine. So I think that's what stimulates, is the divine wanting to be more divine.
I wish to die in this house. But as of now, I don't wish to live here. There's a large part of me that devolves the more time I spend here. I become a younger, less productive, less forward-looking person when I'm home. I love it, and a dip inside is such a cherished privilege. I'm well aware that most people don't have a physical house that can so easily symbolize their roots. But as of now, that's all it is. Roots. A leaping outside of its bounds was all I wanted as a kid. I hated that I lived so far away from my friends. I guess it's only a natural progression from that feeling to now live 2,000 miles away. The more I think about this, the more it's starting to sound like I've been seeing my life inside the mold of a hero's journey. At least that's been the image since my teens. From the departure, to the initiation, to the return, and yes, I'm aware the self-importance here is staggering. But then again, not really. The hero's journey can be subdivided infinitely into more hero journeys. We go through one every day, every moment, every trip. It doesn't have to be as freaking literal as I've made it for myself. Maybe mine's less self-important and just more unimaginative and cookie-cutter. Good, I feel better. So following this mold through, the framework is set. I know where I will end up, where my return takes place. The question then becomes when that transition occurs. When does my initiation phase, or seeking phase, or growing phase become just hollow and stale? When will I feel ready for home? For my 30th birthday, we went camping. a place outside of Ojai, California, and it was ideal. Everyone got along, Hunter brought his dog. Back up. We even took some shroom chocolate and complimented each other a bit on top of a hill. But inevitably, there was a point where we started acting as true Californians and listed our woes against plastic.
On the free market, plastic is just such a dominant force, but it's so dominant that it's just destroying everything. Like, there's no reason every beer should not be in a can, right? Why is there plastic water bottles? Everything should be in a can.
I mean, the reason why single-use plastic bags at the grocery store, though, are still, like, currently the most environmentally viable thing is because anything else just burns so much more gas transporting it because of weight.
All good points, but I couldn't stop thinking about plastic as a symbol. I mean, what a good representation of straying too far from your home, to the point where you aren't wanted anymore upon return.
Well, there goes the conversation.
It reminded me of a farm that Sarah, Bill, and I visited earlier in the month, in which I think I found its opposite.
And then you stir it up like a stew, and these were just built this week, and then it'll spend 4 or 5 days in the belly, and then we have a very particular way it gets stirred up, and we'll do that 8 times, maybe 10 times in the first few weeks of the pile's life, and then it's going to look like this. I build this pile once, and then that's it. That's thermophilic bacteria, heating that up and doing all that work. And it will be a very rich, hopefully fungal tilting pile. When they're bacterial, they're more for vegetables, but this one is more for the fungal life in the soil.
Compost is inherently good, but it's almost the inverse of the hero's journey. A deep honing of what is already there until it transcends its own bounds. Am I oversimplifying compost? No, I hit the nail on the head. Let's move on. The hero's journey fits somewhere within the middle of the two here. But one thing we've learned recently through films like 500 Days of Summer and a more inclusive Seeking Society is that our old myths leave a bunch of perspectives out.
He believed that this time his expectations would align with reality.
It's one way to get things done, but it's not the only way. And maybe not the best way.
I'm trying to also kind of discover or talk about the hero's journey, and that feels exactly like it's fitting that mold of like every single thing coming out of the unified field is kind of fitting into the structure of a hero's journey in that sense.
Well, now you bring up a really interesting, what I discovered doing all this research was that in the West, there's the hero's journey, which is the individual embarking on this journey of self-transformation ultimately. But in the East, it's not an archetype in the East. The individual is not an archetype in the East, only in the context of the family and the culture. So they don't have hero's journey stories in the East, like in the West. They didn't have Beowulf and all those really fundamental stories.
There's this book I read a few years ago called Trying Not to Try that explores ways in Chinese cultures that attempt to create a state of mindless ease. It's inherently paradoxical, effortfully seeking zero effort. That's kind of humanity in a nutshell. One of the methods is the way of Confucianism, which is based off the teachings of, you guessed it, Confucius. It emphasizes extreme discipline to reach this effortless state. You basically practice something until your body knows it better than your mind. This is compost. And I think I respect this way of life more than any other because in most cases, I don't have the guts. It requires getting past the moment where the practice is stripped of all joy, past the moment where you're bored out of your mind, past the moment when the claustrophobia feels impossible and you need to burst. It's a discipline that sits right before the threshold into being inhuman.
To me, I see that as basically being the inverted version of a hero's journey, which is somebody who, instead of going out and detaching and finding new things and bringing them home, they're going beneath. They're going like inward, and whether it being ancestry or family or something, they're learning from their roots as opposed to learning from the air.
Could be. I mean, look, I'm an artist. I make films, I make art. The practice of being an artist, in my estimation, is that it's a kind of alchemical endeavor of self-transformation but then the gold is consciousness. And in creating in the act of creating works of art, one has experiences of transcendence, I think, spontaneously. And a good artist, it manages to create an experience for other people that allows them to have their own experience of transcendence when they're experiencing the work of art.
I met Michael Barnard when he was the program director of the grad school I went to. We were both on our own little heroic journeys at the time. What I've taken from this interview is that seeing your life as one clean, straight line of a structure is a fool's errand. I mean, macro is there, but beyond our perception. We can only be aware of the micro journeys, whether they take us towards plasticity or fermentation. And the goal, maybe, is less about controlling which way you go, and more about making sure each effort completes itself.
I'll probably use the bathroom.
That is, if I have the patience.
Congratulations. You have won. Go home with me.